Welcome to the Cake Therapy Podcast, a slice of joy and healing with your host, Dr. Altricia Foster. This is a heartwarming and uplifting space that celebrates the transformative power of baking therapy. The conversations will be a delightful blend of inspirational stories, expert insights, and practical baking tips. Each episode will take listeners on a journey of self-discovery, emotional healing, and connection through the therapeutic art of baking. There's something here for everyone, so lock in and let's get into it.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Cake Therapy Podcast with me, your host, Dr. Altricia Foster. Today we have the pleasure of sitting down with Miss Capri Cafaro. She is a culinary innovator and she's the founder of Humble Pie Kitchen. She is a part of my collective. It's a group of girls who get together to talk about well-being in the culinary space. So I'm happy to have her on. So Capri is the former Democratic leader of the Ohio State Senate. Yep. And she also hosts, she is the host and creator of America the Bountiful. She's an original food and travel series in the Midwest. She's the author of United We Eat, a cookbook that features 50 recipes that tell America's unique story. She's the host of Eat Your Heartland Out, which is a podcast, and it's also a radio show about the intersection of food and culture in the American Midwest, just to name a few. Her culinary journey is as diverse as it is inspiring. Over the years, she has cultivated her skills not only in the kitchen, but also in understanding the cultural and social dimensions of food. Humble Pie Kitchen, the brainchild of Mrs. Cafaro, goes beyond mere recipes. It's a platform where food becomes a medium for storytelling, community building, and cultural celebrations. Through her creations, Capri intertwines flavors and narratives, showcasing how food can bridge gaps and foster understanding among diverse communities. Whether you are a food enthusiast, a budding chef, or simply curious about the intersection of food and culture, you are definitely in for a treat. I am excited to have Miss Capri Cafaro join us. Hi, Capri. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Dr. Foster. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. We're excited to have you here. Tell me how you're doing, girl. Mental health check-in. It's rough out there. What's going on?
It has been, I think, for everybody around the world, the last couple of weeks has been chaotic. But all in all, I feel blessed. I feel great. Things are going well. I think, and probably yourself included, there's never really enough hours in the day. So trying to find that time to reconnect, recharge is really important, and something that I have had to really work on over time, because it's not my default position. I am somebody that has been fueled on Red Bull and Metallica most of my life. So, trying to kind of chill is, I think it's all relative, but at least recognizing that it is important that don't get a gold star for running yourself ragged.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell people that it is not my badge of honor. I wear so many hats, but it definitely isn't something I'm proud of. Absolutely not, because it makes me too tired.
Yep. And I think that, society very much, I think, and it's shifting, but I think society has really, over time, particularly for women, created this, you have to do it all and do it all perfectly, backwards and heels type deal.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, we've placed, and, I think society has also really tried to reward this concept of being every single hour of the day being scheduled, all that sort of thing. I think that there is a paradigm shift happening.
Yeah.
Because people are speaking up. It's one of the few things that is positive sometimes about social media. is connecting with others that have a shared experience and speaking publicly about, things like being stressed or challenges of motherhood or anxiety and depression or PTSD. When you talk about those things in a collective manner, it reduces the stigma, but it also community.
Yes. And you know what the key that you mentioned too, we're so used to doing these things with heels on. And for me, I used validation was from, going to the stars with heels on, right? I talk about that in my book, but I can go to the stars in my flip-flops too, because I don't need heels to validate me. And I use that to grind myself into the ground. And I'm like, when I'm sitting still, but I actually can't. I'm still learning how to actually sit still and appreciate the moment. Yeah. And thank God we found food. So you've done so much work in the food sphere. I'm going to say the food sphere for now. And I would like to ask you for a pivotal moment or a memory from your childhood that actually sparked this passion for you in the world of food.
Sure. Well, I think like many people, I'm no different. And I think my ethnicity being Italian in particular, we have a very special relationship with food. And food is a way that we express emotion and love and comfort and all these things, right? And hospitality. And so, I grew up, as did my sister, cooking with my grandma. My mom was like, okay. I think she was very intimidated by her own mom's cooking skills. But we learned so much from my grandma in that, from just math, in things that we learned in the kitchen, from math to, just safety. You name it, so, cooking is this laboratory of life. And so, some of my earliest memories definitely are in my grandma's kitchen. And so I've always had that connection, and I've brought those feelings around food with me, into my adulthood. And really it was understanding and recognizing kind of by accident that my time in the kitchen was what grounded me in a very high stress world of being an elected official.
Yeah.
So it was, because again, like your time is not your own, public service is what it is, and that's fine. But then you realize, for a hot minute in the kitchen, like everything kind of falls, to the side, and you're there and you're focused on what you're doing, and you're chopping, and you're, the house is, smells great, and you're being able to welcome people. And then I would use food as a way to bring people together as well. And in a profession, which, so now the one I was in the thick of it, but, is not always one known for its, building bridges and unity, right?
Yeah.
So, food was a way to connect with others and a way to connect with myself. And so I really kind of got to that second place with food as a comfort, as a grounder, as a unifier, and as a place to reset my own mental health, as an adult and in my 30s, really.
Yeah. So you mentioned, being in public office. Like I mentioned in the intro, everyone, Capri was actually the former Democratic leader of the Ohio State Senate. This is an impressive political background here, okay? Can you share what drove you from the kitchen to pursue your career in public life, public office?
I love working with people. And I always, it was, a goal from being a small kid, which sounds kind of funny, but I come from a community in Northeast Ohio that, really kind of felt like it was left behind by so many. We lost a lot of jobs in the late 70s, early 80s, right around the time that I was born. And so I always got this very strong sense that, we were left behind, but government was a way that we could turn it around and help people.
Yeah.
I was really interested in history, and I was really interested in current affairs. And then my, my grandfather was a World War II vet, and he had a big impact on me. And so, public service was always what I wanted to do.
Okay.
And so, and it certainly was not a particularly easy path, but it was, I am so proud of the ability to have worked for and represented the community that I was born in, that 5 generations now of my family have lived in. And, and be able to have a positive impact on places is just incredible. We have term limits in Ohio. So, after 10 years, no more, running for office for me, and at least.
Okay.
And so things shifted, and I did what a lot of I joke retired politicians do, teaching think tank and television. And that's kind of what happened. So I ended up doing cable. I was on, doing commentary on cable news. I was teaching government at a university. I was, doing research and other things. I love teaching. I love working with people. But the whole cable news thing beat me down. I'm sure that shocks people. Beating you down. And just because it's just like there was just so much of the same day in and day out negativity, that's not a commentary on the people that I work with or any of that. Just as a consumer, I think people recognize it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wanted to find a way where I could, I started to really think about this, like how can I bring a lot of these different things together and a lot of my passions together, and to slowly but surely in the background shift over to food, and how can I use food as a storyteller and a unifier, and kind of started to cook up, pun intended, some new projects and apply my skill set in media and my skill set working with people in a totally different way. It took a lot. It took 4 years to kind of get where I am now, but again, well worth it. Stick-to-itiveness.
Absolutely. So, fun fact, I lived in Ohio for 4 or 5 years. My husband was a resident at Case, and I was at the university hospital working.
No way.
That's where I did a lot. Yep. I did a lot.
You're not far from me then.
No, I did a lot of my vaccine work in Ohio, the community, etc. And my son will not forgive me if I didn't mention that he's Ohioan. He tells everybody he's Ohioan.
I love that.
Yeah. So as you transition from politics and now doing a lot more work in the foods arena, tell me, do you see an intersection between politics and food, or how do you see that intersection?
Oh, I mean, there are a number of different intersections. Let's just say from a very sort of basic level, policy impacts food directly. In the United States and abroad. I mean, trade policy, the Farm Bill, subsidies, food deserts, school lunch issues. I mean, so there are implications that directly impact food. I spent 7 of my 10 years in the Senate on the Senate Ag Committee, had a great amount of respect for the hard work that goes into bringing our food to our table. Environmental policy, climate, all of those things are directly related to food. So you have this real, sort of direct, tangible ways in which, quote, politics and food intersect. But I see it as, as a unifier as well, as a way to come together. And that's through my own personal lived experience. We have in Northeast Ohio, a lot of these different fairs and festivals, and not just the county fairs and that sort of thing, but all these different ethnic, the Italian fest, the Greek fest, the Croatian fest, the pierogi dash, we have a huge Amish community. We have wine country. We have Lake Erie, which is a great, freshwater fish, and then we have, dairy producers and produce producers and all these other festivals that, bring people together every year, the Apple Festival, the Pumpkin Festival, you name it. Right. And so being a public servant, at that time, I went to all these different fairs and festivals, and it occurred to me that these type of events are ways in which the community comes together and better understands one another. It doesn't matter if you're Croatian or Italian or not, right? You're still showing up every year for those festivals because you want the food. right? And then have a better into, a different culture and what your neighbors are all about. Same thing with some of these like apple festival, pumpkin festival. Okay, well, you might not grow pumpkins, but now all of a sudden you have a better understanding on how they're grown, and you want to come back every year for those, the pumpkin pie and the, whatever other pumpkin stuff that they're doing. And so, I saw it as this unifier, and that was the big sort of pivot point for me. I came out about 4 years ago called United We Eat.
Yes.
And that was about, showing that food can be a unifier in a divided country. So each recipe, we have all 50 states and the District of Columbia. 26 of the recipes I did a ton of research on, and the other recipes that were contributed equally from Democrats and Republicans from across the country, telling their stories about why these recipes were important to them or important to their state. And I thought it was a great way, again, for people to get to know their neighbors. And okay, you might not like fill in the blank politician, but you might like their recipe. You might be really down with, gumbo or, cherries or whatever it might be.
Yes.
And it's a starting point to have a dialogue. So I feel like maybe that's cheesy, but I really believe in the power of food to bring people together and create a dialogue and for us to better understand and respect one another.
Yeah, it's actually not cheesy at all. I think it helps to find that there's so much that's unique and common between us, then we are different, right? And the thing is, like, the world is so divisive right now. And if we find a recipe, it really helps bring us together. Like, why the heck not? Cheesy, never, right? So you're retiring from politics. Tell me about when Humble Pie started.
So Humble Pie started back in 2019. And, I always had this, I thought about wanting to, highlight different recipes. So let me back up for a second and say that I had a little blog called the Humble Pie blog, where I would every week put out like a new pie recipe.
Yeah.
Some of them were mine, some of them were like from other places, but it was a fun way, almost just like a catalog of pie recipes. And again, kind of pie stands for a lot for me, coming from the heartland of America. Everybody has their own type of pie. I mean, you can also have, every culture has a pie, empanadas, whatever. You have all these types of pies that each culture has. But for me, pie is this kind of ubiquitous dish, sweet or savory, that is always around, particularly and is a sign of hospitality and home and connection. So I had a lot of fun putting that together, and that's where the Humble Pie name came from. But I wanted to do something that was evocative of community, hospitality, and create a Humble Pie home and kitchen as sort of a two-pronged thing. One, as a little bit of a storefront for something fun for me, which is curating and selling in America, cookware and bakeware. So really trying to lift up makers big and small that make different things for the kitchen here in the United States. I designed tea towels that actually had a little bit of fun political puns on them, and also some aprons as well that were inspired by old vintage apron patterns. A friend of mine, I don't sew, but a friend of mine helped me sew the samples and sort of thing. So, so it was this landing place for this concept of, heartland hospitality through selling these, curated kitchen goods made in America. But it also became the umbrella of everything else I started to do in this new arena for me. So, the cookbook, and then I started to do some writing, for example, for the Food Network website, for Huffington Post, a couple other outlets where I was doing stuff on food and travel. And so it became kind of the landing place to collect sort of this new resume that I was building. Fast forward about a year later, I kicked off a podcast with Heritage Radio Network called Eat Your Heartland Out, very much, kind of the same ethos, talking about food and culture in the American Midwest, a place that I think is widely misunderstood and generalized as flyover country, and a place that doesn't, isn't homogeneous, doesn't have a lot of diversity, is only about, meatloaf and corn dogs. And well, some of that might be true. There might be some truth to that. There's so much more here. So I set out on this, crusade in some ways to show the Midwest using food. And so we cover everything from, whether it is, Somali restaurants in Columbus that are serving camel to, how, shared community refrigerators are trying to, deal with food insecurity in different parts, the Midwest, and everything in food tours and breweries and LGBTQ farmers. I mean, so we cover the gamut. And then I did my pilot for my show, America the Bountiful.
Yes.
Which is kind of like Eat Your Heartland Out, but on a much, much larger scale. We are telling America's cultural story and its history using food as our guide.
Yeah, using food as your guide.
And that is, and again, back to it's that unifier, and it's something that is a connector that people can understand, and so it took a while, COVID happened and my dad got sick and there are all kinds of things that happened. And so, a couple years passed and, then I dusted myself off like many of us did. And 2022 they started to come back together, and we got the interest from American Public Television and Public Television is our presenting station to bring America the Bountiful to the masses.
Yes. And
then Eat Your Heartland Out ended up becoming picked up on rural radio, Sirius XM. And, a lot of learning in the process, a lot of rejection, a lot of stuff. So this is something that I do want to say, and is that we often put out the wins and we miss all the other stuff that happens. You may have seen some of these graphics or the memes where it's like you see the glacier and you see all, here are all the great wins, and then you don't see the stuff that's underneath of all the other things that has happened, and in the background. And so I'm very grounded in that. I think it's important to talk about the tough times.
Yeah.
And how hard it is sometimes to stay on a path that, I sat there at one point when I kept kind of getting derailed on my concept of shifting over to doing, food and, doing more narrative storytelling and getting away from news and of what did I do? Why did I do that? Yeah. It would have just been easier for me to just stay the course. Why? Maybe I made a huge mistake. But I part as tough as it was at times, but I definitely questioned myself, and I definitely was, it was tough. It was really hard at times. Yeah. And I know I'm not alone, with anybody who has tried something new, entered a different profession, tried and failed different things, whatever it might be, I think it's a universal that I think we ignore. Yeah. Again, society tells us that it's only people want to see shiny, happy people,
Exactly. Yes. Because I'm truly guilty of that too. I only put out what I want the world to see, but I'm not showing the nights I don't sleep, the work that I put in. I had a really hard weekend this week, but I had to stay up and prep for these conversations as well. But we don't show that. We show up because we're present and we're having these great conversations. And I think the world really turns its back on us when we start complaining. They were like, oh, stop complaining. But we're not really complaining. We're just trying to show you what goes on behind the scene is truly more monumental, and it is what propels us, into these spaces that we see the outcomes of who we are. So kudos for mentioning that in a conversation, because, my foundation speaks young girls, and the listeners, most of our listeners are young girls. So I love that you were able to voice that in this moment, because I know that they're listening, that there's a lot that goes on behind the scene, and not because you get knocked down, it is important to rise back up and face it, go after what you want. So kudos to you. I want to talk about the TV show.
I'm ready.
I want to talk about everything that's fun about it for you. Like, what made you decide to do that? Tell me about some of your favorite shows.
Oh man. Okay. So like to kind of rewind for a second to something that I said a little bit earlier about all the different fairs and festivals, that I went to when I was, in office and being on the agriculture committee and all this stuff. So I came to this conclusion that, in my little backyard, right, if we have all these things, the Italian Fest, the Pumpkin Fest, wine country, Amish country, what else? Nobody knows about any of this stuff. Do you know Ohio has islands? Nobody knows Ohio has islands, right? Ohio has islands.
They do?
We and so, so nobody talks about that. And so I'm thinking to myself, if we have all this stuff in my little backyard, what else is out there in the rest of the country that people aren't aware of? But I think more importantly, to me, it's okay, why do we have Italians, Croatians, Germans, and all this stuff in my area, right? And then, of course, those communities have festivals that are attached to churches, and then they get bigger and they end up in downtown, whatever. Well, because the Italians and the Germans and the Irish and the Croatians and fill in the blank, they all came here to work in the steel mills and coal mines or the car factories. But people moved from Appalachia to the work in the later on. Same part, or also partially with the freed enslaved people that end up moving into Ohio later, and that informs our culture, right? So, to be able to tell that then through food, because there's a reason why people come out and eat pierogies or cavatel every year at these festivals, because these people that show up here by accident. And so it's an ability for us to tell a story of place that's connected through food. And so that's what we set out to do. And the pilot was in Wisconsin, and we told Wisconsin's story through beer and cheese. Now we all know, the Green Bay Packers, they're the cheese heads, all this kind of thing, right? It's America's Dairyland is on their license. Why? Because the Swiss Holstein cows over to Wisconsin in the 1800s, and I think with the census, I don't quote me on that, but roughly around that time, 40% of the people on this in Wisconsin showed German as their main language. So, and the Germans brought over their hops and brewing. And so you fast forward, and that's still the story of Wisconsin today. And so, and that's what we do across the country. And it's been very important to me to include Indigenous voices.
Yes.
Places where that's relevant, Minnesota, Arizona, even Massachusetts. I mean, we include Indigenous voices. We're going to be out in the Pacific Northwest and Washington State. For season 2, we have another group of Indigenous individuals out there that we're going to be working with. And so, the food tells our story. I mean, and there's a couple that really stand out for me. Georgia, we did not do peaches in Georgia. We did pecans because I was like, peaches are too obvious. So in doing the research for Georgia, I have an incredible organization called New Communities Co-op with roots in the civil rights movement. This husband and wife couple founded the New Communities Co-op to help with Black land ownership and also helping train Black farmers in, ways in which they can get higher yields and all this other stuff. So I kind of joke in that episode, you come for the pecan pie recipe and you stay for the civil rights lesson, but it's so frigging powerful. So I'm there with Shirley Sherrod and this incredible, huge plantation house, which is where they now do most of they have a research farm and a bunch of other stuff. That's where they do most of their programming. And there's this whole backstory, behind how they finally got this piece of property that you can see in the episode. But the powerful part is that it was one of the largest slave-owning plantations in Georgia. And now African Americans are running it and lifting up other Black farmers by having a research farm there with pecan groves.
Yeah.
It's massive. So you learn about parts of the country and their history and why they are who they are through food. And then you get to also know again, that process, the agriculture, the climate. We talk a lot about there are a lot of different crops that that we've dealt with, from maple to cherries, you name it, that because of climate, the harvests are shifting, you're dealing with different issues. Why do certain things grow in certain parts of the country? Well, because they have better soil conditions or, microclimates. So there's a lot. I mean, I guess that's why we're on television, right? Because I steered into my nerd, and it is a much more, this isn't just, yes, it's a food show, it's a travel show, it's also a history show, and it's one where you can learn all kinds of different things. Yeah. And I'm very proud to be the person that can. It's not about me; it's about me being the conduit to share these important stories of everyday Americans. We do have a couple of celebrity chefs here and there, but most of the people, everyday Americans, that are making a difference in their community. And that's what this is all about.
Yeah. I love that you said it, steered your nerd. I'm going to use that. That's something steered into my nerd.
I'm keeping it real. I'm just keeping it
So, all of this work in public sector, in food, but you're also a big advocate for mental health and the importance of mental health. And I would like to talk about what your personal relationship with food and mental health, and speak on why you believe it's important.
Absolutely. I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. I found when I was in office that things, when things got really stressful, the place that grounded me and helped me recentered was the kitchen. And, so it wasn't something that I had always been conscious of. I think in those moments in my early 30s where things were really hard, being in the kitchen made me feel normal, if that makes sense. In a world was, there's not a whole lot of normal when it comes to politics and public policy. You get beat up a lot, and there's just a lot, and you're working 7 days a week, and, it was tough. It was a very tough time. And, and so, I made that connection. It stayed with me as something. Then, again, a way to connect with others. So when I had spare time, what would I do? I would bring everybody together, and we would cook, or I would do little Pampered Chef parties every year, like if you're familiar with Pampered Chef, and we would do it during a thing like a food drive thing that we do every year called Harvest for Hunger. Okay. So we some related to the Harvest for Hunger contributed to the food bank, do can drives. So anybody that would come over would bring that stuff, and then the stuff that we would sell for Pampered Chef, we would round up and give there. So it stuck with me. I'm also a licensed worker. I have my social work. For the last, actually, I guess 7 months now, I have been actually practicing part-time, which I could not tell you how happy I am to do this, like to be able to work. I miss helping people. I so miss helping people, and found a really incredible fit to do telehealth. And so I'm also, I practice part as well. And that has just been incredible. And so in looking at different ways to see, how could I don't currently do it because I just don't really, my setup isn't really geared towards it. But I've often thought about how can we integrate the kitchen into the mental health space. So I started to do research, and then came across a number of people in this now extended community that have, that recognize that this connection between food in the kitchen and mental health. I had two of them on my podcast, as a matter of fact, too. Since you have a connection, I may have to bring you on as well.
Yes, bring me on, girl.
Let's connect on that, because I would love to have you come and chat, because it would be good to talk about, your business and the Cake Therapy Foundation with us, because I am trying to use the little platform that I have as well to get people to better understand that, this is something that most everyone, recognizing not all, but most everyone has too. And it's a way for us to, engage with others, build problem skills, build communication. Whether it's intergenerational, parent-child, couples, group. It's a way for people to, and it lets you down too. So all of a sudden, you're chopping, you're mixing, you're doing whatever, and then all of a sudden, the conversation starts to, and so, I'm so happy to see, I am not there quite yet, but I'm so happy to see other practitioners doing this, incorporating the kitchen into the mental health space, providing that kind of service, service to their clients. And I think that we're at the starting point now, kind of where music therapy, art therapy, play therapy 15, 20 years ago. I think where culinary therapy, culinary arts therapy is now. And we may see that growth in operationalizing it and integrating it into mental health services, I hope, as we continue to understand it and go forward.
Yeah, because like in our foundation, it specifically speaks to and work with systems impacted girls. Systems impacted. We found was the programs that were being implemented in the juvenile detention centers were driven mostly by boys' data, but there were nothing in that data. When we disaggregated data, we showed that the programs don't work equally for girls. Yeah. So programs such as cake therapy and art therapy work better for girls once they're able to touch and taste and smell. So we are definitely, supporting anyone who includes these types of programs and these art form into treatments and therapies. I like you, I've kind of turned our passions into purposeful work. And our listeners mostly, when they hear about culinary arts and people cooking, they say, oh, it's a need, we have to eat to survive. But they don't see it as a supporter or a sister working hand in hand with talk therapy. What advice would you give to an individual who's aspiring to become, one, a food entrepreneur or a baker or a caker or a chef, in turning their passion into something that becomes ultimately their career? Oh, wow.
There are a lot of people out there. I would say, first off, do your research. And it's a difficult and competitive space, but I've met and I've read about so many people that do integrate purpose in one way, shape, or form into their work, culinary space, whether it's with fair wages, whether it's with their supply chain, making sure that they're working with, suppliers, growers, makers that are local, that are from, marginalized or BIPOC communities, that, people that are utilizing regenerative agricultural practices. Think about how you want to impact it. I think sometimes we feel like, oh my gosh, like I'm just like one drop in the bucket of the world, right? What kind of impact can I make? You can make huge impact if you're thoughtful and purposeful about what your mission is. So think about your mission and vision statement. A lot of people mess around, like, well, I'm baking bread or I'm doing this, and I'm going to sell to farmers market. And then I'm going to, all of that. Absolutely. Like you want to be able to scale it. You want to be able to know the rules, your cottage baking rules, your permits, your sales tax, all that nitty gritty stuff. You need to know all of those things. How you sell online, what that looks like, I would say grow incrementally in that sense. You don't want to just try to like get a storefront right away, test it out. Farmers markets and that kind of Etsy, they're fantastic ways to be able to test out what you're making. But, you can think about a vision and mission statement from day one. What do you really want to do? Again, I find that a lot of people in the food space were like, I was messing around and then people started to ask for this. And then I was like, cooking in my kitchen and then my friends I should sell. And I think that's what so many people do. But I would say that once you start, if you find that, you have a desire to have, a community to impact, think about, the ways in which you can, articulate that, put it in a vision and mission statement, make it part of your business plan. Think about, if and how that is going to, impact your bottom line. If you're going to be paying a little bit more for certain things, are you going to, contribute X amount towards, partnered nonprofit for a month here or there, whatever rotating type thing. There are so many different ways to do it. And, if you decide that you're going to have a storefront or even not have a storefront, or do, you can do pop-ups where you do classes, right? You can do class pop-ups. There's an incredible nonprofit organization in Northern Virginia, the DC area. I believe they're called Together We Bake, and they help women to get their different culinary certificates to provide them with skills, either coming out of the criminal justice system, DV survivors, that sort of thing. I've also interviewed a number of different organizations in the Midwest, and I know, across the country where there's a lot of training that has gone on with refugee women that have resettled, and helping them operationalize skills to become economically self-sufficient by giving them training and certification. So, I would definitely, find your tribe, that sounds good too, but, there's so many communities that, whether it's local or online, where you can get that, virtual mentorship and get, feedback and thoughts and collaboration, that sort of thing where, you might realize, oh, well, here's I didn't realize that there was somebody in my community that supplied vanilla, whatever, and work with them because they share your values, So I think that, finding your tribe, learning from others, coming in with that vision and mission statement, checking back in with it, and planning, building that, and see where it goes, is all really, I think, good building blocks for, trying to bring together, as you said, that passion with purpose.
Yeah, that passion with purpose. With this extensive resume of yours, what is your legacy? What legacy do you aspire to kind of create, through your work with policy and food and storytelling?
I honestly don't think a whole hell of a lot about my legacy at all. I would just hope that I'm remembered as somebody who cared about others and tried to do the best that I can. And that's and that I'm a good friend and neighbor and partner. That to me is important than, the CV that's on paper is, what did I make a positive impact, and was I, a good and supportive person to others? And that to me, all I can hope for.
Yeah. So this podcast was designed specifically to create platforms where girls like me, who are now in their teenage years, who are feeling forgotten and left behind, and having a real challenge in believing that they too can, because the system as a whole has impacted them in such a way, and their socioeconomic status has really retarded them in such a monumental way. Speak to them before we go about who they can be and how they can.
Absolutely. My background may be different, but I have some I think key core similarities in some ways. I'm the first woman in my family to graduate from college. I had a little trauma baggage for one reason or another. I was bullied a lot, and you sort of, nothing was handed. And, I would go one step further to say there was a lot of roadblocks, not the same roadblocks by no way, shape, or form am I trying to conflate those things, but simply to say that, I know what it's like to shoulder a lot of burden and to be told that you can't do something, and to people tap your way for one reason or another. Now, when you deal with, systemic socioeconomic and racial barriers, obviously it's level, but it is absolutely possible. And, I think that what we need to recognize, we all have an obligation. I think that you and I have an obligation to try to build and reshape those systems in a way in which the systems become better equipped and more supportive for all women and girls, regardless of socioeconomic and racial and ethnic backgrounds. So we, as sort of the older generation, have that responsibility. But, I think that the thing is that, okay, somebody before us, somebody before the girls watching, came before them and decided that they were going to make rules. Okay, They were going to make the rules. Who's to say you can't make the rules? The only people that are saying that you can't make the rules and you can't write your story are these other people over here. And so to understand and tap into your power, which we all inherently have, is key. And even if you feel like, well, like nobody around me has power and I can't see it and I can't, it seems so distant, look inside and know that is within you. And the one thing we have is the free will to write our own story and to not ever lose sight of that capability, regardless of, again, what the sort of the have said, this is where you are, this is as far as you're going to get. Says who? Says who? And, keep your eye on how are you, the next generation, to rewrite the rules for the better.
Yeah.
And not be complacent, because it can't change. We can't make change, nor can we sustain change without every generation being engaged in that process.
Yeah.
And so I think it's about believing in yourself. And, it certainly also helps. You can find someone, again, she's say representation matters, but representation does matter. And if you, look, there are more and more people that, look like, the diversity of this country, that are becoming, at the highest echelons of everything from government to corporate world, to television chefs, to restaurant owners, to doctors and lawyers, and, look those people up. Maybe they're not on TV all the time. Okay, maybe you might not be, maybe you want to, maybe to be, I don't know what. Well, if you're an African-American woman, young girl aspiring to be a lawyer, we got a woman who's Supreme Court Justice of the United States, take a look, you'll find that inspiration and make that a touch point too.
Yeah. Take a look around, find a mentor, find someone who impacts or influences you. And make a change.
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Yeah. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there, and don't be afraid to ask for that mentorship or help. Like, go out there and be like, hey, can I help out? Like, don't be afraid, because there are people out there like us that want to give that helping hand and want to mentor and want to answer questions to support you in your journey. So don't think, well, if I send an email or if I send Instagram message that no one's going to talk to you. No, we will. We will, and we want to help.
I know. We absolutely do want to help, and we're accessible. So thank you so much. Share with our listeners where we can find America the Bountiful, where they can also pick up United We Eat, and remind them of where they can get Eat Your Heartland Out.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So you can find pretty much everything at the one-stop shop on my website, CapriCafaro.com. That's CAPRI, middle initial S like Sam, Cafaro, CAFARO, CapriCafaro.com. So that will give you links to Eat Your Heartland Out. That'll get you links to United We Eat, as well as America the Bountiful. So you can kind of find everything through there. My Instagram, X, and Facebook are all also Capri Cafaro. America the Bountiful has its own deal, which is AmericaTheBountifulShow.com. And also America the Bountiful on Instagram. And if you want America, products, and or sign up for our curated kitchen subscription box, you can find that at my main Capri Cafaro website, linked to humblepiehomekitchen.com. So plenty of ways to find me. If you are so inclined, it would be an honor, but it's really been a real pleasure to speak with you and to speak with your audience today. You're doing great work, and
thank you.
And listen, and anybody out there that wants a mentor, I'm here to help. You want to run for office? I got you. You wanted to figure out how to get into TV? I got you. Hit me up.
Girl, for an instant, can you imagine? I was thinking about running for office, but that's another conversation, girl. But thank you so much for being on here and having, this conversation with us. I hope that our listeners learned so much from you. I most certainly have today. And I want to encourage everyone to continue supporting the Cake Therapy Foundation. We are growing. We are in so many spaces. We're in middle schools right now. We just got funded. So we are really, really excited. The work is, and we're putting in the time, and we want to connect with you. Please go ahead, contact us, email us at hello@thecaketherapyfoundation.org. And I look forward to our next conversation. Thank you. I hope that this has been your slice of joy and healing. This has been the Cake Therapy Podcast. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Capri.
Oh my gosh, this was great. Thank you so much. And just hit me up, let me know when it comes out, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you for tuning in to the Cake Therapy Podcast. Your support means the world to us. Let us know what you thought about today's episode in the comment section. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And if you found the conversation helpful, please share it with a friend. Also, follow Sugar Spoon Desserts on all social media platforms. We invite you to support Cake Therapy and the work we do with our foundation by clicking on the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description, or by visiting the Cake Therapy website and making a donation. All your support will go towards the Cake Therapy Foundation and the work we are doing to help women and girls. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode.